Hey class, Alec here. We are going to talk about the sixth and final level of analysis with respect to the supply curve. We're going to look at the supply curve in general functional form. And you know I love my general functional forms, and I know you're probably sick of me saying that. But anyway, so let's look at this. I've got the supply curve, and what I'm doing is listing out all of the determinants of supply, and I'm trying to do it in a logical or descending order of importance. So I'm showing you that in my trusty yellow pen here, the supply of good one is a function of or depends on, first and foremost, its own price. Okay, how do we know that? Well, it's an endogenous variable. It's captured as a variable in our model on the vertical axis. And we know that the law of supply says that there's a positive relationship between price and quantity supplied. As price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. As price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. The ultimate underlying reason for that is because in the short run, businesses face rising costs of production. In order to get them to produce more, you have to pay them a higher price. Okay, I won't go in too much into that. We can talk about that when we get to deeper levels of microeconomics. The next variable in our list is the costs of production. And here we're simply talking about our resource prices. Here's our land, labor, and capital. The relationship here is negative. If your costs go up, you're going to get a change in supply down. And what that says is businesses do not like rising costs. Their willingness and ability to sell would be affected by those rising costs. If costs go down, you'd have a change in supply up. The next one we're going to talk about, and I won't talk too much about it, but it's important, and is technology. Technology can enhance or improve the willingness and ability of a firm to supply. And if that's the case, then you can see here that improvements in technology will lead to increases in supply. We know by the fifth level of analysis that the number of sellers would be included as a variable in this list. As the number of firms enter a market, that would shift the supply curve out and to the right, and depending on the nature of the demand curve, it would cause price to fall. Okay, so we talked about that. Now we're going to talk about government policies. Government policies can be two types. There could be taxes. I have a negative relationship on taxes. What does that mean? It says this: if you have a change in taxes up, you're going to have a change in supply down, and vice versa. If you have a change in taxes down, you're going to have a change in supply up. They're moving in opposite directions. The tax is an additional cost to businesses. On the other hand, government can have subsidies with respect to businesses. Subsidy is, think of it as a gift or a grant to a business. Now, it could also go to the consumers, and it doesn't matter which, but think of things where government wants to encourage production. Classic example is the flu shot. How much do you pay for your flu shot? Most people pay zero. Why? Because the flu shot has been subsidized by government and insurance companies so that it will encourage production and consumption. So in this case, as we have a change in a subsidy up, we're going to have a change in supply up. Does that make sense to everybody? They could take away subsidies and the supply would go down, but let's just focus on the subsidies. Your education is subsidized so that more people will receive education. Okay, the quality of our human resources will improve. You have positive spillover effects for everybody else. So education is another example of something that is subsidized. We have other prices, the prices of other goods. I could label this P2, comma, dot, dot to PN. And what this does is it recognizes that the market for good one over here is affected by the prices of other goods. Okay, and what we're going to focus on is the price of substitutes in production. Now, I like to think about farmers when I think about this. If you're a farmer of wheat and you see the price of corn going up, what do come planting season? You would reduce the amount of wheat that you're growing and transfer acreage into corn. And you can see there that has a negative relationship. Everybody understand that? And let's just underline that. So we now listed, and I finished up the list here with etc. There's a lot of things that can affect the supply of good one. We're left with many variables. We can't get to our model building because we have so many variables unless we say ceteris paribus. And when we say ceteris paribus, it transforms this general functional form into the quantity supplied of good one is a function of its own price, the most important determinant of supply, dot, 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 and other things too. When we say other things too, everything to the right of P1 becomes what's called a non-price determinant. Another way to think of these are shift factors. Okay. Now notice what we've done is that we are now left with two of the key variables, so we can get to two dimensions on my iPad, a whiteboard, or on your notebook paper. So notice what happens here is that I've taken something very complex and I've distilled it down into two variables using our ceteris paribus assumption. We've talked about that with respect to supply. We've looked at that in other modeling opportunities. Now let's talk about it. The lower right is what's the difference between a change in quantity supplied and a change in supply. Well, a change in quantity supplied, we're going to have a positively sloped supply curve, and we'll name it S sub 1. That's the supply curve at time period 1 under a given set of assumptions 1. We will start with a P1, run that over, and you need to practice this yourself. This would be good practice for you. We come out with Q1. At a price of P1, firms are willing and able to supply Q1. What happens if the price goes up? According to our general or our functional form here, we know that the quantity will go up. What happens if price goes down? We know that quantity will go down. Again, that's the law of supply. So a change in quantity supplied is nothing more than a movement along a key given supply curve caused by a change in P. Given means that ceteris paribus is okay. None of our non-price determinants have changed. On the other hand, a change in supply is a shift in the supply curve caused by a change in the non-price determinants. So we would start out here with S1, and let's just look at an increase in supply for now. Here is our point of origin. The supply curve, for whatever reason, we'll talk about that in a second, shifts out and to the right. Goes like this. This would be an S2. I would capture this or write it as an increase delta S arrow up or an increase in supply. Now, what caused that to happen? It could be that you had a change in costs down. It could be that you had a change in the number of sellers up. It could be that you had a change in taxes down. It could be that you had a change in subsidies up. And then lastly, it could be a change in the price of a substitute, whoops, down. These all cause the supply curve to shift out and to the right. Think right. Think away. Use the origin as your frame of reference. And the reason I'm going to talk about that is because if you use your origin as a frame of reference, you won't get confused about increases or decreases in supply. Now notice what happens here, and I'll just show you this very, very briefly, and I'll do it in pink, is that we'll have S3. This is a decrease in supply. It is all points are closer to the vertical axis than both S1 and S2. But we're comparing it to S1, so all points are closer to the vertical axis. This is my frame of reference. Many people say an increase in supply, and they think it's going to be on top of the original supply curve. That's not the case. An increase in supply will be a rightward shift away from the origin. A decrease in supply would be a leftward shift and in or closer to the origin. Okay, I hope everything's clear. We're going to put the curves together on the next lecture. Thank you very much. Talk to you later. Bye.